So have you broken your streak yet?
I am trying to, but it's surprisingly difficult. I'm in the Streak Society since I'm at 1,000 days, so I get 3 streak freezes. So I've just been watching Duo freeze to death for the past day. It's very disturbing. I open my phone and it's him just going. So I'm like, okay, well, so yeah, so it's been difficult. Yes, lots of notifications and emails.
Guilt tripping.
Yes.
Lots.
Yeah.
Lots. Maybe we should talk about why you're breaking your streak, why you're trying to break your streak.
So that's probably sounds really weird, but yes, I am intentionally breaking my 1,000-day Duolingo streak. And I can just kind of go a little bit back to the beginning, because initially when I started doing Duolingo, it was very helpful to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was learning a lot of Chinese. Before, I could not read any of the characters.
Yeah.
And so I did learn a lot of that. And it made me care about learning Chinese. It made me care about language learning.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I started regularly video chatting with our grandparents from China. And that was a really great thing, Before then, we just weren't really in touch very often. And so, yeah, it did incredibly good things for me for a very long time. But then there was just kind of a moment when it was just very telling that the motivations were kind of shifting a little bit, where it wasn't really as much about learning Chinese and much more about the streak. And
keeping the streak going.
Yeah, and the main moment when that was kind of just so obvious is that after our house fire in September of 2022, the night of the house fire, so it happened around like 1 a.m., and at 3 a.m., we were in a McDonald's because like nowhere else is open at 3 a.m., and I did not have any shoes. I did not have my glasses. But the firefighters recovered my phone.
So you gotta imagine this was a really traumatic experience, yes. Right? And okay, we had just run out of a smoking house in the middle of the night. It was just crazy, right?
Yeah.
And it was more than we could comprehend at the moment.
Yeah.
We're driving over to this 24-hour McDonald's, and I hear beside me,
yeah.
That is the sound that Duolingo makes when you get a question right.
Yeah, it was me wrapped in a Red Cross blanket doing my Duolingo. And in that moment, I did not realize how bizarre that was.
Yeah.
But our dad, he was just like, "What are you doing?" And then I'm like, "Oh, Duolingo." And he's like, What? Like, what is going on
wrong
here?
with
you?
Like, he didn't say that.
Yeah.
But
what is happening with this app that is so compelling that, like, 2-3 hours after your house catches fire, that's the main thing on your mind.
Where you literally we could have died.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. So that was a really telling moment, because, like, obviously 2 hours after our house catches fire, I'm not like, I need to learn more Chinese right now. Like, it was I need to extend my streak.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, that was a main moment when we kind of started to talk about, like, okay, what's actually going on here. And so I think that the main thing that was really telling about that moment is, like, what's my actual motivation to do Duolingo.
And also it shows just how good Duolingo is at getting you emotionally connected with that app, and more specifically the streak.
Yeah. When it's literally just a number on your phone.
It doesn't even actually say very much about how much you've learned or how much you know, because let's say you do Duolingo for like 2,000 days, and you're like fluent in Chinese. I mean, I'm not saying that if you do Duolingo for 2,000 days, you'll be fluent.
Yeah.
I'm hoping you learn something. But it's also like how much you do every day doesn't like show on your streak.
Yeah.
And then you don't do it for like 3 days. And then all of a sudden, now your streak is at 0. And it's like, no.
It's not like all the knowledge disappears.
Just disappears.
Yeah.
It's not very reflective of, like, I can't think of a scenario where that would really be the case in everyday life, where it's like you miss one day and all of a sudden
your progress disappears.
Your progress just disappears.
Yeah.
Like, you don't really see that in everyday life.
Yeah. Well, I think it was also in terms of your experience after you broke your streak, how it was kind of difficult to get back into it.
That's one thing I found is, like, it's well, I actually broke my streak like a month ago, and well, I'd say there are two motivations for before when I was doing Duolingo. I still am trying to do Duolingo, but that's the thing. It's I'm having trouble getting back into it because I don't have the streak. That also shows that the actual motivation is not really coming from learning Chinese. And I think the reason why the reason why they have to rely on these things like the streak, and also whenever you get a question right on Duolingo, you've got these characters who are like celebrating and like dancing, just like, yay, you did it. It's very gamified. And it's like, so there's the positive motivation, but it's not actually coming from learning Chinese. It's coming from those characters dancing and you feeling like, oh, yay, I'm so great because all these characters are celebrating for me. And then you've got the anxiety about losing your streak. And then, okay, so I got so the night that I lost my streak, we were having a conversation, and this was a meaningful conversation that we were having, very engaging, and it was also very important, and it was pretty late too. And I had just remembered that I needed to do my Duolingo. So I immediately grabbed my phone, got on the app, and then dun, dun, dun. I had been signed out of my account somehow.
And you didn't know your login? So
I didn't know the email or the password.
Yeah, you started panicking, and so then we were all panicking.
And then Sume started panicking, and then Mommy started panicking.
Yeah, and so they like completely hijacked everything.
Derailed
and
everything to my Duolingo streak. So we were freaking out over that. And Daddy, well, he jumped in and he was like, isn't this interesting how you guys are having such a strong emotional reation to this streak? And I wasn't listening to him. I was just like, oh, my Duolingo streak. I need to save it. But yeah, he kept diving into that a little deeper, and so I started listening, and I was like, oh yeah. That is interesting, because I realized, oh, that doesn't actually really say anything. The streak doesn't even have value at all.
We're all like panicking because of this number.
Yeah.
Okay, what's going on?
What's going on? And so that was really, really interesting. That led to another conversation about the streak that inspired this podcast. But yeah, that was the night that I lost my streak, and once I started thinking about that, I was like, okay, I guess I won't save it. Well, it would have been a big pain in the butt to try and figure out what the email was and the password. So it was kind of out of laziness, but I still made the decision. I was like, okay, this doesn't make any sense, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that there is a very difficult challenge for education platforms because, of course, like Duolingo is competing against other language learning apps. But above all, they're just competing for your attention.
Yeah.
Right? And that's especially difficult now when there's so many other competing distractions.
Everyone's competing for your attention.
Like so many people are slaving away for attention. And that really is like the predominant commodity in this digital age. But because of that, it is, I think, very difficult for any kind of platform that's trying to help people do constructive things.
Yeah.
And I think that, and because of that, you just see a lot of psychological manipulation through all the gamified aspects of the platform. Like, not only the streak, but also the social aspects of it, and the leaderboards, and the XP and
don't
the gems.
forget the guilt tripping of the duo board, because that is harsh
part of
right
it,
there.
yes.
You've been seeing like all of these, like the duo board.
Every
so
time
cute.
I open my phone, he's freezing to death.
You see duo freezing to death.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't think that what Duolingo's doing is bad, because, I mean, they're helping people to get excited about language learning.
I mean, at least they're manipulating them into learning a language.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think compared to all the other platforms who are trying to fight for people's attention for not constructive purposes, like, I'm all for what Duolingo is doing, but I think there's a broader question about, okay, but what is the ideal goal? Is the ideal goal that we make education and learning so fun and addictive that everything else is not as interesting? Or is the ideal goal that it doesn't matter if it's addictive or fun, because people are able to choose for themselves in the moment? Is this something that I want to do because it's helpful to me, right?
Being intentional.
Yeah, shouldn't the ideal goal be that we help people to become more intentional and have that free will to choose?
Have the willpower.
I want to do Duolingo or learn something else, or help, clean my room, or,
Well, it's like doing it because you want to do it, not because you're being manipulated into doing it.
Yeah.
Even if that thing is constructive. Even if that thing is constructive, you want to do it because you're choosing to, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not that being unintentional necessarily means that what you're doing is bad, but it means that you aren't really consciously deciding whether or not you should be doing it, so you aren't evaluating whether it's good or bad, right? And so once you are intentional about something, that's when you can really see, like, hey, is this the best use of my time? But that's just very difficult. And especially in today's day and age and the environment that we're in, it's just that much more difficult to fight against all of these, competing distractions, to actually just have the mental freedom to choose, okay, well, what am I going to do? And that's part of what comes out of, there's this feeling of boredom. And it's like, people talk about it as if it's just like inherently negative, like, oh, I need to get rid of my boredom. It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But like, boredom just means that you're kind of there and you have to just think about, like, okay, what should I do? It just means that you don't have anything to do and you need to think about it, right? And it's like, well, that's a really difficult thing to try to reintroduce, because now it's so easy. If I'm bored, I'm just gonna pull up YouTube.
I can't actually remember the last time I was bored.
Yeah,
because there's just so many things. I mean, part of my personality is that I'm great at finding things to have fun.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I immediately go to like a social media platform, but that is interesting. I can't remember the last time I was bored.
Yeah, and I think that is a very difficult thing now, is that, like, we don't need to have those moments anymore where it might occur to us like, hey, I'm doing Duolingo because of the streak, not because I care about language learning, right? Like, those moments don't really need to happen anymore because it's so easy to just pick up some other distraction. And so I think that is, those kinds of evaluation moments, it was just kind of bizarre to us how prevalent and just normal this whole streak culture was for those doing Duolingo.
Yeah.
Like, there was something your friend said where...
Oh, yeah. Well, I was talking to my friend like a while back before we started getting into all of this, and it didn't really register then, but I was talking to her and I asked her if she was doing Duolingo, and she was like, yeah, I was doing Duolingo, but then I lost my streak.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, why does breaking your streak result to
I broke
not
my
doing
streak,
Duolingo?
so now I can't do Duolingo anymore.
Well, I think it's harder to get back into it because you don't have that emotional attachment anymore.
Yeah, but it's just but when she said that to you, like, you didn't blink an eye, right? That was just like, oh yeah, you know. But
in
now
the moment,
in the moment. But now thinking back on it, it's like, oh wow, like this is just kind of completely dominated. And I think that there is also you know, a broader point about like what is the purpose of learning. And we talk a lot about how the purpose of learning is application. Yeah, it's actually do something with that knowledge. And when it comes to language learning, for us, it was really important that we were applying it in terms of communicating with our grandparents and extended family in China.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I actually learned the most when I actually learned the most Chinese, it wasn't when I was doing Duolingo. No matter how much Duolingo, it wouldn't compare to when our grandparents came over from China for 2 months.
Yeah.
And they can't speak English.
Right.
And so we were talking to them in Chinese, and I learned so much. And it was because I was applying it. And it felt good. You get a lot of sense of accomplishment from it, but Duolingo, like most every other platform, doesn't really, you don't, it's not focused around applying your knowledge. And
well, if Duolingo was truly helping with application, there would be something where you could connect with other people learning the same language, and you could actually communicate in that language that you're learning. But like, we had to find solutions for that ourselves by starting a Chinese speaking club on WEquil app, and like also talking with our grandparents every week, and like that's something that we had to take initiative to do outside of Duolingo. And I think that is very telling in terms of like, well, okay, you can be doing this for the streak, but then like, okay, well, if you're not talking to anybody in that language that you're learning, you can learn a lot of a language, but if you're not talking to anybody in that language, like, how is it helping you?
Yeah,
you know?
Well, I mean, I think the reason why they can't rely purely on curiosity for the subject, I mean, they don't rely on it at all, for curiosity for learning Chinese. That's basically the only thing they use that for is getting people on the app who's like, oh, I want to learn French or something like that.
Yeah.
But apart from that, they don't use actual curiosity for the subject, like, pretty much at all. And I think the reason why is because they don't have any way to apply it on the app. So you're not going to be motivated by that. And that's why they have to rely on the streak and the characters celebrating and doing little dances and the duo guilt tripping and all of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do want to clarify that the reason why I'm breaking my streak is not to stop doing Duolingo. Like, I'm going to keep using Duolingo if it's helpful to me, but it was just purely about regaining intention so that I can know that I'm not doing this for a streak, I'm not doing this for a number, I'm doing it because of this or that goal that I have. With Chinese, it was like, I want to be able to speak with my extended family in China. And now I'm thinking like, well, I've pretty much gone through the whole curriculum, and I was kind of just redoing lessons and stuff because I cared about the streak. And so I wasn't really learning anything anymore from it. And but when I do get back on Duolingo, once the streak finally goes away and Duo is warm again, then I'm thinking of like learning Spanish, because I know a lot of people who are also learning Spanish on Duolingo, and I can actually talk to an actual human being.
There's also a lot of people in the world who know Spanish, less than like, I think, Japanese or like French or something like that.
Yeah. So those were the big two reasons. Is like, okay, well, there's a lot of people that are in the world that speak Spanish, and I also personally know a lot of people who are learning Spanish. So like, that is really helpful for me in terms of, I know my goal in terms of actually applying this in a way that would be actually beneficial to me, right? Versus like, yeah, supposedly I know a lot of Spanish. I've never talked to anybody in Spanish, but I have a 30,000 day streak, and it's like, okay, well, So I think that, I mean, I do think that intention more broadly is just a very important concept to strive for more generally, and not just like, oh, in my Duolingo and my language learning, but just more broadly in your life, because absence of intention can be very dangerous, and is especially dangerous when you have so many companies using, employing no shortage of psychological manipulation tactics and powerful machine learning models to try to get what they want out of you. But it's not you intentionally choosing what is your goal, what do you want. And it's not, and it's really hard in order to really achieve your goals. It does have to take a strong degree of intention, and it can also be difficult sometimes to identify when we're not being intentional. And I mean, I think there's also this concept of habits, which is essentially you can continue doing something that's good for you without having to be intentional.
Right.
And that is a very powerful tool. But I do think that it can be helpful to evaluate.
But if you're not being intentional, then you can create bad habits,
Right.
which is
Well,
like,
yeah.
yeah. So that's where bad habits come from. Is like, oh, you're not being intentional enough in your life with the things that you do repeatedly. So you can have good habits, but you can also have bad habits.
Yeah. And so I think that there is, even just being intentional in the good habits that you have can just help you get more out of it. And also just keeping in mind, like, why am I even doing this? Like, you can have a good habit, but if you've forgotten why, then you might not be getting the most out of it that you could. So I think, I guess to close this out, if anybody is interested in trying to, learn a language intentionally, you can join our Duolingo group on
where
WEquil
we
app.
are applying our knowledge.
Yes. And also just more broadly, just applying intention in your life. We're definitely very interested in that, and hope to have more conversations about that in the future. So, all right.